I just wanted to thank everyone that are coming in for this session for the Mind Body Therapy Summit 2021. My name is Stacey Hackett, and I work with the Embodied Lab, and it is my absolute pleasure to be here and to be part of this summit, and just to be able to gain so much knowledge and wisdom, and for this for us all to be tuning in as a community from around the world is just amazing. So thank you for everyone that is coming in, that is joining us. Our next session and our last session of day 2 of the Mind Body Therapy Summit is with Dr. Ariel Schwartz. So the session that Dr. Schwartz is going to be bringing us today is Embodiment in Trauma Treatment, an Experiential Journey. So I'm just going to read your bio and do a little bit of an intro for you, Ariel, and we're going to pop the links that people can reach out to you, where they can kind of connect to you as well in the chat. But Ariel Schwartz, PhD, is a licensed clinical psychologist, a somatic psychotherapist, and a certified yoga instructor in Boulder, in Colorado. She is the author of 5 books of the integration of mind-body therapies into trauma treatment, including the Complex PTSD Workbook, the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook, and she is also the co-director of the upcoming 60-hour integrative somatic trauma therapy certification program through the Embodied Lab that will commence in September. We are so excited for you to be here, and I'm really excited for the next 90 minutes. So thank you, Dr. Ariel Schwartz.
Thank you, Stace. It's lovely to be here, and lovely to be here and connect with you all. So really, I want to start out with just an invitation for all of us to just land with whatever you're coming into this particular session with, depending on your time zone, right? It may be that you're coming in groggy because you've just woken up and it's 5 a.m, or it may be that it's late in the day and you've been on sessions all day, or you've been working all day, right? So that's the kind of power of being able to connect in these large groups, is that we're all coming in different time zones and with different embodied experiences. So just take a moment and see what it is that you're coming in with, what is present for you. Noticing both the quality of your kind of physicality, that embodiment that's present for you. Notice the quality of your own breath. And noticing your mind, perhaps setting a kind of open-minded intention just to observe your experiences without judgment or without criticism, so that there's a mindset of curiosity during this time. And if other mind states show up, if mind states of restriction or constriction show up, we're not going to reject those. So allowing yourself to just embrace or turn towards what is. Noticing any emotions that might be present. If you've been practicing some of these experiential embodiment practices throughout the day, you might have stirred the pot a little bit. I'm seeing a few nods on that one. So thanks, Kendra. And right, she's like, she saw me. And but so there may be a little bit of a stirring that's or excuse me, pardon me there. That there may be some stirring that's happening. And so there's just a practice of being with what is. And I think as we embrace emotional tone, that there's also a quality of embracing the energetic of whatever you're experiencing, whether that might be a heaviness or a lightness, a contraction or an expansion. And once again, perhaps turning towards whatever is present without making any state wrong. Right? If there's a alertness or fatigue, that the question isn't so much about trying to change the mindset or the state or the emotional tone, but what is that experience that you're bringing into this needing from you? Perhaps needing from this time that we have together. And you get to be in choice this whole time, right? Choice about whether you're looking at the screen or not looking at the screen, whether your camera's on or off, whether you're sitting up or laying down. You know, you get to tune into what allows you to be in kind of learning mindset and what really supports that, whether that's, you know, alert and taking notes or kind of passively just letting the words wash over you as you're just resting and trusting that things are going to land and integrate just as they need to. So my intention for this 90 minutes that we have together is to do just a little bit of sharing with some slides about kind of what my perspectives are around embodiment, particularly in trauma treatment. And, you know, that's primarily my background. I'm a psychologist. I work so much so with, oops, my view just changed, but I want to go to gallery view. I don't need to talk to myself, right? You know, so much of what I do in this is kind of really write about and work in an integrative model. So from a somatic psychology perspective and from a EMDR perspective or a cognitive perspective of how it is that we work with traumatic memories, where how the brain processes that, how the body can get stuck with that. So we'll talk a little bit about what is trauma and what does healing look like. And much of my work is focused on the understanding of the world of complex trauma and chronic traumatization, the experiences of the ongoing accumulation of experiences of chronic stress, whether that is the 15 months of a pandemic, or the experience of ongoing childhood trauma, whether it's overt trauma or the accumulation of more subtle types of experiences of being discounted or dismissed or not understood or rejected, right? Things that sometimes can be lumped into a normal childhood, and yet these experiences have an accumulation and an embodied accumulation. So we'll look at those perspective from a developmental trauma lens as well. And so we'll do a little bit of talking and some slides, and then I'm going to take down the slides and guide you through an experiential process, because I really feel that that's been the request and the intention of this summit, is to learn in an experiential forum together. And when we get experiential, and I'll remind you of this when we get there, the invitation is to dive only as deep as is right for you right now, right? So that especially if you've been kind of, churning in this embodiment summit and mind body summit for day 2 now for a full day, you may be cooked, right? And but if you're ready for more, then there's opportunity for more embodied learning here. And some of you, the rest of the summit happened while you were sleeping, so you're coming in bright and fresh. So we'll see what happens together. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions and interaction, which I think is a really lovely part about being here live, right? You have this opportunity with the 130 or so of you that are here to interact in real time. And so I'll try and really carve out at least 20 minutes at the end just to talk together and hear what's present for you. Because I think that's very special about being here real time. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to pull up some slides. And we'll dive into that part of our experience together. So I'm going to start with just a broad reflection on what are we talking about with trauma. This question comes up a lot, and I'll share with you a few folks whose work I respect, their perspectives on what is trauma. I will also kind of share with you at the end my perspective as a kind of sum up of some of these pieces. So the first quote that I'll share is from Freud, right? And that trauma is this breach in the protective barrier against stimuli that leads to feelings of overwhelming helplessness. And what I particularly like around that phrase, the breach in the protective barrier, is that there is this way in which ideally we all have an experience of kind of an energetic boundary in the world as well as a physical one, and that boundary within allows us to have a sense of containment of self and empowerment of self, a sense of efficacy in the world. And when that has been violated, either because someone came in and literally invaded that protective barrier, invaded our space in some energetic form or physical form, or because there wasn't enough meeting of self that helped form that protective barrier, right? So sometimes in the case of ongoing neglect, there is a way in which the breach of the barrier comes about as the lack of being seen or witnessed or attuned to. And what happens on the part of us, the child, is that we actually have to breach the barrier. We have to go beyond the self in order to seek connection. And in that process, it's an exhaustion of resource, right? So either way, whether it's the barrier has been breached from without and we have to protect, or it's been breached from within because there wasn't enough contact. And so the energetics in the embodiment journey start even in utero, right? They start very, very young with what it is that we're fielding in the interpersonal world that we're in. And going back to this phrase, the overwhelm, right? Judith Herman brings that into her definition. Any event that overwhelms the ordinary human adaptations to life. That experience of the overwhelming helplessness, that there is some way in which I don't have the available resource to manage or to process or metabolize what it is that has happened. From a somatic perspective, Peter Levine speaks about trauma as thwarted instincts, that what would have protected me, allowed me to mobilize in response to whatever happened, wasn't available. I couldn't flee, I couldn't fight. My voice, no matter what I said, it didn't make a difference. No matter how much I reached for my caregiver or tried to love my parents, they never received me. And so all of those instincts of either healthy rest and being able to just relax, or the instinct of mobilization of trying to move out of a dangerous situation, get stopped. And we'll take a closer look at that as we go. Gabor Mate speaks about trauma, not so much about the external event, but what happens within the individual. And I think that's such an important element of this definition, that it's the unhealed wound that we're compelled to defend against by either constricting our own ability to feel or be present and respond flexibly to situations. And I'll add to this, or that we are actually stuck in extension. So one way of responding is to constrict and become smaller, or constrict our expression. And the other is to actually, I often think of the fairy tale, and Clarissa Pinkola Estes speaks about this so beautifully in her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, but the fairy tale of the red shoes, of the person who is stuck in constant movement, constant performance, constant doing as a way to manage the world, right? Or stuck in extension energetically, where I'm actually caught outside of myself as a way to manage the world, hypervigilantly tracking everybody else's body language, voice tone, what's happening out there, that prevents that kind of energetic being in oneself. And then Resmaa Menakem's phrase here of the body's protective response to something that we're perceiving as potentially dangerous. So again, it's not so much about what is happening out there, but the perceptual layer is such a key component of what is trauma. And just to add one more piece about the kind of energetics of this is that ideally, and you'll see I'll go between share and taking the slides down so we can see each other a little more clearly, but that there is this way in which, from an energetic standpoint, ideally we have this capacity to move between expansion and contraction pretty fluidly. And from a polyvagal perspective, it's the capacity to actually go into mobilization and to go into rest. It's the ability to move between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system without feeling like we're getting stuck in one extreme or the other. And so the process of healing from trauma is a reclaiming of nervous system flexibility, and it's a reclaiming of physiological resilience. And that, there's so many trauma therapies out there that are about talking about the event. And that's not a terrible approach. It's just not a complete approach, right? So we want to be able to know, how do we talk about what happened and simultaneously really attend to the energetic imprint and the somatic imprint of those events, so that we can catch where those thwarted instincts remain incomplete, and we can come to completion. And there's many paths to completion, right? Like there's many paths to that somatic integration. There's body mind centering, and there's many different somatic modalities and somatic experiencing, and there's paths of yoga, which is, for many of is a big one for me. There's paths of reclaiming intuitive and instinctual movement. There's paths of this in nature, right? There's the trauma release work of David Berceli. There's all of these different paths to reclaiming healthy mobilization and healthy rest. Really catching where that constriction gets caught in the body and finding a way to resolution. So we'll keep exploring some of those paths together here. And, for you to know a little bit about my background with somatics, is that in 1996, I ended up moving here to Boulder, Colorado, because at that time, Naropa University was one of just a few programs that had a master's degree in somatic psychology. And I was drawn to that 20 some years ago, because it was my path to healing. It was a personal journey of embodiment that I needed for integration of self, particularly because in response to my own childhood, I was a somaticizer. Everything that I experienced got caught in my body. And I personally needed to seek out the support of understanding it top down, as well as experiencing it bottom up, in order to reclaim that nervous system flexibility and cognitive and somatic repatterning, right? So some of this is very personal as much as it is, my kind of professional aspirations. So I'm going to go back into a few more slides here. So, from a somatic psychology perspective, because I initially studied in this master's degree program in 1997. So again, we're talking, 24 years ago. This was what I kind of think of as like a heyday in somatic psychology, because at Naropa, we would have these symposiums, not so different from what's happening during in these summits, right? We would have these symposiums where Peter Levine and Pat Ogden and Bessel van der Kolk and Al Pesso and everyone would come together, and Candace Purr, we'd all like have these kind of powwows, Susan Aposhin, Christine Caldwell, we'd have these powwows together of like, what's your perspective of what's happening with embodiment? And what's your perspective on how we heal? So because my original foundations in somatic psychology were from this integrative, multimodal approach, it's very much informed my perspective on how I teach it. So I teach the common factors model, or the unified approach of somatic psychology, rather than just from an SE perspective, or just from a sensory motor perspective, or just a moving cycle perspective, right? So some of those common factors are really about understanding the ways that difficult life experiences, especially those from early development, but at any point in the lifespan, contribute to patterns of tension in the body. It's pretty simple, right? This isn't, this doesn't have to be more advanced than that, right? That our body awareness and tracking and sensing and feeling and moving helps us access an internal source of wisdom, the intrinsic resilience that lives inside of each and every one of us, that helps to guide the healing process. And, what I love about, I call my work, resilience informed therapy, but what I love about all of the modalities that have inspired me is that they're all trusting this intrinsic wisdom. Whether it's Hakomi and understanding that there's organicity inside of each individual, that there's an organizing drive towards health, whether it's the adaptive information processing system of Francine Shapiro and EMDR, who speaks about our intrinsic capacity when given sufficient support to work through difficult events. And that there's kind of that key phrase in there, when given sufficient support, and that the majority of what happens with trauma is a result of the lack of having had sufficient support at the time surrounding the event, after the event, and not having a place to process it, to metabolize it, to let the shaking happen at the time or after, to let the emotions, the panic move through. And as a result, the unsequenced pattern repeats and repeats and becomes actually its own conditioning in the body and mind. So we engage our clients or ourselves in the healing process by cultivating that body awareness and exploring healing movements at a pace that we can tolerate, right? At a pace that doesn't overwhelm, because we don't want to overwhelm within the context of healing. So some of the core principles of this integrative model is that pretty much when I study, what works in trauma-informed care, it's phase-based care. So that if we go back to Judith Herman and understand the phases of healing that we need to stabilize, then we can deepen into where the trauma is unresolved, and then there's an integration phase. And that journey of stabilization, deepening, integrating can happen in a single session. It can happen across the arc of the entirety of a healing journey. And so that there's little cycles and there's larger cycles, and that it's not always linear, right? So that we stabilize, we might deepen, we might go back to stabilization, we might have a place of integration, we might have a new event that needs support. And so we're just trusting that we can move between those different phases as needed. That good trauma-informed care is both culturally and contextually sensitive, right? So that we're taking into our understanding where someone's coming from, what's their worldview, what has been their core life experiences? What has been the context of their wounds? What is it like to live in the world as it is today? Do they have a sense of belonging? Is there a sense of ongoing discrimination or oppression that's living unresolved, either in the family system or the community or the society or your country or the world at large? And intercorporeality we'll explore a little bit more in a future slide, but it's basically this understanding that the healing journey is the worldviews. When we're working relationally, it's the embodied experience of two people dyadically, or in some cases, a group of people that are influencing and exchanging with each other. It's a very intimate journey. It's not a, like skills, I'm not going to teach a series of skills that happen without a context. And that certainly within the context of relational healing, that context includes the embodied other, right? So that if you're a therapist, your own embodiment is a very key part of the healing journey, right? And, that mindful body awareness is something that is cultivated over time through practice, through the exchange, and that, as I shared at the beginning, that ideally we're cultivating a mindset of non-judgment and curiosity. So that's the mindful part, and then turning toward the body, listening, movement, being guided by sensation, not necessarily having to think our way into the body, but allowing the body to inform the mind. That some of the core elements of this work are also experiential. And of course, we'll dive into a little of the experiential side here in a little bit. And it's exploratory. So, to use this word experimental, and I'll borrow from Hakomi Integrative Somatics for a moment, Ron Kurtz's work, is that that we set up any embodied experience with this opportunity for an experiment, with this opportunity to observe, to explore what's happening in there, which means there is no wrong answer, which means there's no such thing as resistance, therapeutic resistance. There's nothing you're doing wrong. If the body is saying no, or if there's numbness, or if there's an experience of retreat or shutting down or constriction, then we get to go, wow, okay, well, there's something there to explore. It's just information. There is no bad response. There's no right or wrong. So it just comes back to focusing on the here and now. Even though we might be exploring something in relationship to the past, we're working very here and now. And, as you get to know me and my work, I'm very influenced by existential psychotherapy. I'm very influenced by Gestalt, which again is all working very much in the here and now. This work is strength-based, which means that we're going to draw upon the existing strengths that live inside of the individual, live inside of you. And it's resilience-focused, which once again is really trusting that inside of each of us is this intrinsic drive towards health. And it's relational. Once again, it's a co-regulation journey. It's a dyadic experience. It's not, me over here studying the other, evaluating the other, right? This is a shared growth. And I think it's one of the things that I love so much about having this orientation as a psychologist, is that it's an opportunity for ongoing growth on the part of both individuals, right? Like, as I receive the other, I'm changed. One of the things that I love about that in particular, and I'll just stop share for a second on this, is that the experience of receiving the other and allowing ourselves to be changed in that process, in that practice, it evens the playing field, right? It's not this expert novice, or, it's out of the medical model. It's a way of saying, I respect you enough to receive your intelligence, your wisdom, to be changed by that. And I think one of the most profound wounds that happens in childhood is the experience of not being received, of the essence of who you are not being grokked, not being understood by the other. and this deep feeling of lack of belonging that occurs as a result of not fully being felt, received, not having made an impact on the other. Right? When we even study the brain of the new parent, there is a malleability, there is an increased neuroplasticity, and much of this research happens with new moms. So excuse me, dads, for a moment. But the research on looking at the neuroplasticity and the function of oxytocin in the maternal brain, right, and that the mother's brain is changing in relationship to the infant. And so if we resist that experience of being changed, right? If we resist actually the ways that children are going to show us our unfinished business because they're so right-brained, right? They're going to reflect back to us what we might not even be aware of in ourselves. But if we're not receiving that, and we're not going to do it perfectly, right? Like, what do we know about like infant attachment is that it's rupture repair. It's a journey of imperfections. And that through that, of course, we learn that all relationships have their imperfections and their ruptures, and we can tolerate it. But the good enough scenario here is that there's enough experience of being understood and received by the other so that we get a sense of having value. Right? So that's what we're attempting to repair psychotherapeutically, right? So that if we're working with the other person and we're receiving them, then we're perhaps looping back around to what didn't happen and what ideally should have happened in early childhood. So somatic therapies are not just a set of interventions for the client, they are the foundation for the attuned presence of the therapist. When we look at the science of embodiment, we're exploring how embodiment is this combined experience of sensations and emotions and movement impulses in the present moment. Alan Fogel has some really beautiful work in his book, Body Sense, on this topic. The conscious awareness of our somatic experiences then enhances embodiment. So our bodies are here, but when we can increase awareness, the conscious reflection upon what's happening interoceptively, what's happening, the feelings, the constrictions, the tightness, the emotions, the fatigue, the alertness, all of that little practice that we started with, that's going to basically give when we are aware of it, we're onto it, right? It's like we've found something that had been hidden and now we're awake to it. And we're going to combine that with our exteroceptive five senses of what is our surroundings and the proprioceptive sense of body and space. And it's this combined integration of these feedback systems that the brain is using to get a sense of basically what is our embodiment. And, from a polyvagal perspective, you can add neuroception to this picture, which is the way that the brain is constantly tracking things like heart rate and changes in our breathing rate and changes in quality of tension in the body and so on and so forth, to track whether or not we feel safe or threatened. And that's happening underneath conscious awareness. But once again, we can bring conscious awareness to that equation. Lovely research here about the integration of mindful body awareness and trauma treatment is that it's going to enhance the functioning of the prefrontal cortex, which can then be able to connect to the insula and the sensory motor cortices, which are the parts of the brain that are basically receiving this sensory input from the body. And so now we can reflect upon how we're feeling. That reflection, that engagement of the upper brain dims down some of the activation of the limbic centers and the amygdala. we are able to better reflect upon our emotional reactions, and now we can make decisions grounded in wisdom. And I'll borrow from Marsha Linehan that wisdom is this lovely interplay between logic and emotional intelligence, so that we can attend to the emotional somatic experience, and we can bring in reasoning brain, and we can find that sweet spot where we're not just stuck in automaticity of survival reactions. And then there's, again, the increased interoceptive awareness. And through all of this, this mindful body awareness has been associated with improvements in intentional control, emotion regulation, and decreased PTSD symptoms. The work of Antonio Damasio looks at somatic intelligence, or the ways in which our embodiment practices help build a reservoir of bodily kinesthetic awareness. So we need awareness of the body to help, again, with affect regulation, to help us make decisions, right? Like, one of the things that he says is that if we can't remember the way that we felt the last time we did something, and it's the felt experience that serves as a kind of conscience, right? So that, like, if I remember the last time that I went out with that group of people and the way that they were making these kind of risky choices, and how I felt afterwards, and or how I felt when I drank, or how I felt when I gambled and I lost all that money, right? And there's a felt experience that goes with the past that provides a conscience that we can draw upon to make future decision making. And it enhances our relationships, it strengthens compassion for self and others, it informs trauma resolution. I'll pause share on this. So part of Damasio's research was studying individuals who had experienced damage to the part of the brain that could connect between the somatosensory cortices and the prefrontal cortex. That was the damage and there's historical neuroscience cases, but basically that individuals who could not reflect on their somatic experience, who maybe previously were kind of like upstanding citizens, all of a sudden started gambling, or having affairs, were having all of these, engaging in all of these risky behaviors. They started drinking when they previously weren't drinking. And they lost their conscience. They lost the body and the memory of what happens, right? His book is called The Feeling of What Happens, and how we need that feeling to basically enhance our functioning in the world. So, once again, it's just a beautiful argument as to why we need to incorporate the body into the healing journey. And the intercorporeality of this is this recognition that the body embodiment is an ever-changing dynamic relationship between the self and the environment. It's challenging this idea that the self is a discrete interior consciousness. I often think of the difference, for example, of doing psychotherapy in nature versus doing psychotherapy in a really beautiful psychotherapy office that has, flowers and comfortable seats. The difference of doing psychotherapy in a hospital setting, the difference of trying to do healing work in a room with concrete walls, and how someone else shows up can't be evaluated outside of that context. The embodied culture element of this is this recognition that we're all coming into the room with the totality of our cultural and socially informed somatic experiences, and we acquire these passively and they're inherited, right? So, like, if you think about growing up in a family, all the body language, all the facial expressions, all the gestures, these are all the embodied culture of a family. And that they're going to inform how we carry ourselves in the world, right? You can even think of, got my host here who's from Australia, right? Like, you can think about the accents that we pick up, the quality of the voice tone. These are all elements of embodied culture. Some of you have heard me share this story before, so excuse me if I repeat myself, but I enjoy sharing it. So I was at a family wedding, and my we come downstairs. This was pre-pandemic. This was years ago, because my grandfather's no longer living, but this was years ago. We come downstairs at the hotel to all gather for dinner. And my grandfather comes into the the dining room, and he's just white as a ghost. What happened, Grandpa? And he says, the strangest thing just happened. I was walking down the hall, and as I'm walking down the hall from my hotel room, I see a man walking towards me. And before I realize it, he says, my heart starts beating. I start sweating. I'm having this incredible feeling. I'm looking down the hall, and my father is walking towards me. Now, his father is deceased many years before that, right? So how is this happening? As he's walking down the hall, he realizes he's walking towards a mirror. Okay. And there is that experience of the body language, the gait, right? All the things that we don't even realize we've picked up until all of a sudden we see it. There it is, right? So we are all walking into the room with the other, with our own embodied culture. What are we entering into the space with? And the more that we can increase awareness of what we're bringing in, and we're not going to be perfect at it, right? Like, this isn't about a perfection journey. It's an ongoing awakening that happens over many, many years. But even with the intention to receive the feedback about maybe what we've missed, right? Maybe what gets mirrored that we didn't realize was us, because we don't always know what it is that we're walking into the room with. When I take down the slides for those little bits, I'm so appreciative of the little bit of nods and smiles and like feedback that I'm getting in your faces. So it's a very, I do that just as much for you as for me. So thank you. So, this is kind of a repeat of what I've already said, but I'll share it in the slide, that when we're looking at, quote unquote, a healthy stress response, what we're seeing is that there's some event that was overwhelming that breaches the protective barrier. There's an increase of cortisol, which is our body's natural way to help us manage a threat. We go into the sympathetic nervous system, which helps us mobilize through action. And we're either going to fight or we're going to flee. And that doesn't mean that we have to fight the other or run away, literally, but we're going to feel that sympathetic mobilization. We might shake it out. We might have a, whoo, that was really intense, right? And as we allow the body to metabolize and sequence and move and do whatever we need to do to have the feelings move through us, we can return to resolution and some quality of homeostasis. Although, there are ways in which we are sometimes profoundly changed, that homeostasis might be a new normal, but nonetheless, we have some way of coming back to a sense of safety. And the unresolved stress response occurs when there's trauma exposure and there's the increased cortisol, and then there's some form of blocked mobilization. And either we're going into a freeze shock response in which there's tonic immobility, so that feeling of being frozen but in a high activation state, or there's a faint response, which is a collapsed immobility, in which we feel like we've lost our capacity to mobilize in that low energy or that collapsed form. And then as a result, defensive action remains unresolved in the body. There's this feeling then as if the threat is ongoing. Over time, and especially when this occurs as a response to childhood trauma, this failure to fight or escape, the physical immobilization becomes a conditioned behavioral response. That's Bessel van der Kolk's quote. Right? The ongoing early developmental trauma in particular can prime the nervous system for immobilization. An infant does not have an option to flee or to fight and will resort to the collapsed immobilization earlier. But then in long-term early onset trauma, it's going to shape the nervous system within a dangerous environment. It gets kind of hardwired in there. And it's why, once again, we can't talk our way out of this. So in adulthood, the social nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system may fail to successfully engage, and we need to reclaim those responses. It's one of the reasons why I really like Berceli's work, TREs. I really like the therapeutic yoga for trauma. I like coming in with movement as a way to try and reclaim some capacity for mobilization in the system. And you'll see kind of more psychotherapeutically some of the ways that I do that here shortly. This conditioned immobilization is also connected to some of our other core trauma responses, which I'll refer to as fawning and submit response. I'll borrow from Pete Walker and his work on complex trauma, that when a body responds to threat, when a person is trying to respond to threat by trying to appease or please another person, right, taking care of their needs and hoping that they won't hurt, maybe I can, take care of them and they won't attack me, right? The submissive response is driven by the parasympathetic nervous system and leads to this drive to attach, right? And this is often the root of dissociation, that when the earliest attachment relationship is also a source of threat, that one has to basically split off the incoming threatening information coming into the senses that are leading to the urge to flee or to fight in order to sustain or maintain the attachment-driven need for social connection, because attachment is an equal biological force for survival. And so there is basically these two aspects of self that functionally can't coexist, because if I follow the need to protect myself, I might lose the very attachment to the other that I need to survive. All of this, especially these really early memories and later memories that are impairing the way that the brain is storing memory, because the traumatic system is going to shut down the hippocampus and shut down upper brain centers. So these preverbal and nonverbal memories, they're not a story often, right? Sometimes people don't even know why they're feeling what they're feeling. It's not even images, right? It's motor patterns, it's sensations. So we need to know how to go toward that safely. In somatic psychology, we have this frame of understanding holding patterns as a form of posture and a form of implicit memory. So because some of these images are rather archaic, but they're valuable. The belt image here is from Stanley Kellerman, and he has a whole book of drawings like this that you can take a look at in his, I have it on my shelf here, I'm spacing on the name, emotional anatomy, right? So he has all these images of basically the ways that the body gets bound by chronic stress and trauma. And the Reichian segments over here on the right, where we have the ocular and the oral and cervical and thoracics and all of these common places in the body where we hold trauma. And so the experience of developmental wounds can lead to what we refer to as character strategies, or basically, this is just who I know myself to be because I've carried all of this in the body for so long. And that part of healing is catching, and for those of you, again, as a yoga instructor, I will always think of these as corresponding to the chakras in the body. I will also, from an applied polyvagal theory in yoga, for those of you that know my coursework in that, is understanding how there are nervous system and endocrine system plexes in the same areas of the body that correspond to the chakras. So that the ways in which there's the cardiac plexus, which is all of the nerve endings extending into the heart and the lungs, and how we're responding to threat in the chest, or the laryngeal plexus here in the throat, or the way that the jaw clamps down, or the way that the diaphragm contracts, and the lumbar plexus, right? So there's a lot of science that corresponds to these same areas of the body that are so prone to reacting to stress. We can even think posturally, the way that under stress will curl in, right? The way that the psoas muscle will actually help prepare us for flee or fight by drawing in preparation for moving out. But if the moving out never happens, if the shaking never happens, if the fleeing never happens, it gets truncated, it gets stuck in the trunk, gets truncated in the body unsequenced. Pat Ogden has this lovely piece of work on exploring posture in this sensory motor psychotherapy world and understanding the ways in which positions are actually forms of memory, and select emotions and behaviors are possible in the body in certain postural stances. So that when I always think of this Charlie Brown cartoon. I actually contacted the Schultz Peanuts company to ask if I could use it in my PowerPoint. They said no. So I'll just have to explain it. Charlie Brown is, doing one of these, walking around like this. And I think Lucy comes up to him and she says, well, you'll feel a lot better if if you lift up your chin and you look up to the sky. And he says, what's the point? There's no good in doing that if you're feeling depressed, right? Like, so we, in a way, we can go toward the feeling by capturing the posture. And, I'll borrow from Aristotle here in the sense of we are what we repeatedly do. So if the posture is the access to the feeling state, and the feeling state is simply who I know myself to be, well, why would I give that up? It's an existential dilemma. If I let go of this way of knowing myself in the world, who would I be? Yeah. Thanks, Janet. I'm appreciating you're so expressive here, and you're right in the middle of my screen, so I'm appreciating it. It's good. So when we're with ourselves, when we're tracking ourselves, when we're with other and we're experiencing other, there are all of these ways in which the body gives us feedback as to when we're holding an experience of threat, right? Whether that's a widening or a narrowing or furrowing of the brow or the widening of the eyes, it's a changing in use of eye contact, looking away, or excessive swallowing. It's changes in how we're breathing, it's changes in the facial expressions, our postural changes, level of muscle tone, whether we feel tonic, hypertone, or collapsed, gripping the hands into fists, changes in voice tone, whether we're jumpy or we're totally still, right? Use of movement, and as I mentioned before, contractions in the psoas and the hip flexors. So a lot of the somatic psychology work really speaks about window of tolerance, and Scott Lyons, our Embodied Lab founder here, has really rephrased that for me as window of capacity, which I just adore so much. I've integrated it this way in which what we're really building is the capacity to be with more. So we're not tolerating an emotion, we're not tolerating a sensation, we're being capacious with it. We're really allowing ourselves to be able to be with more of who we are. And the initial process of healing is often about cultivating that capacity to be regulated, to be in the window, to find that stability, right? But that as we grow in our capaciousness, then we can start to process more. And then we might develop a new window and we might stabilize there. And then we grow again and we can be with more. So we move between these three stages of healing, right? Those phases that I spoke about at the beginning. And we do this by greeting the growth edge, so that we're building the resources to experience safety and connection. And then we're catching that hyper aroused place that we can be with, that edge of sensation in the body. We can breathe more into that. We can find the discomfort. We can stay with it longer. And that's going to help increase the distress tolerance. And it can be at the upper limit of the nervous system, hyper aroused states, and it can be building tolerance for rest. Building tolerance for easing and yielding into gravity with a sense of safety, which itself can also take time. I've had many conversations with Steve Porges about this, and this quality of the way that we can, if we move towards safety too quickly, we can actually fall over into the threat experience again. Like the more that we turn towards safety and we start to relax our defenses, the more access we have to somatic experience, but we might get flooded again. So there's this dance between, you know, the pacing towards a sense of safety, as well as a pacing towards turning towards the remnants of threat. Yeah. I really appreciate Kathy Kane and Steve Terrell's perspective. They have a book called Nurturing Resilience, which I just found really lovely to read from a somatic experiencing perspective. And they've offered up this term, the faux window of tolerance, which I think it happens a lot. It happens a lot in psychotherapy, where basically we think it's resolved, but really we're managing. We're managing distress, and that we're basically overriding symptoms in a way that mimics being in the window of tolerance, but we haven't actually grown the window of tolerance. So ultimately, the symptoms tend to re-emerge rather than fully resolve. And a lot of skills-based work out there ends up creating this cycle. So we want to move out of that cycle. And part of how we do that is through the co-regulation and the mutuality, so that, you know, the clinician, whatever you are, whether you're a body worker, a yoga teacher, whether you're a therapist, that your use of breath and affect tolerance and embodiment is modeling your willingness to be with distress. And basically you're going to lend your window of tolerance to the other temporarily, so that there is this capacity for them to kind of grow into your capaciousness and to learn a new experience, because the likelihood is that they've not had someone else be with them in their distress historically. Now, in this model, we understand that co-regulation precedes self-regulation. So there's this way in which what I learn from other then helps me turn towards myself with a new reference point. And once again, there's mutuality. There's this dyadic experience where we're impacting each other. And that as the clinician is attending to our own body throughout the whole healing journey, that we're going, something just happened here. What are you noticing in your body? Or something just changed, or I just noticed I suddenly got tired, or whatever it might be. That's information that might be relevant to the other. It might be relevant to you, right? So there's often this question that comes up when I teach this material, like, whose is it? Is it mine? Is it theirs? Once you feel it, it's your job to attend to it. So once it's alive in your body, all you need to know is, how do you breathe and work with what's present in you in a way that helps you come back to a sense of your own ground and your own sense of self. That right there is enough to model the other. It's not our job to stay in the distress of the other. It's our job that if we've joined it, or if we've picked up on it, or if it's touched off our own pain from our own past, then we attend to it. And that provides the opportunity for the co-regulation. So this is the kind of integrative approach that I offer around somatic psychology and a 5-stage model for embodiment and trauma treatment, is that we are aiming to basically attend to body sensations, learn how to respond and regulate by strengthening the somatic resources, whether that's through body awareness or that capacity to really yield into gravity, the capacity to kind of find our own push into the ground and really, really ground into our legs and feet, whether it's the capacity to really find the boundaries within the upper body and the boundaries of self energetically, how breath can tie into that. Sometimes, and this ties into that satisfaction cycle, it's really about grounding into the body so that we can reach into other without losing a sense of self. And that we can receive from other in a way that takes us back to yield. So I'll put up, for those of you on Facebook, on my Dr. R.L. Schwartz page, I'll stick up a little resource out there about satisfaction cycle. So it's a lovely little article that you can read on there. But we're aiming ultimately, once we have sufficient somatic resources, to then go toward the memory of what happened. We're deepening into the original wound. We might not even know what happened, but we're going towards the felt experience. And then we can explore it by repeating it and exaggerating it and in getting to know and amplifying the sensation in the body. And that's Christine Caldwell's moving cycle work. Right? Then we can reclaim healing movement, because not only does the body hold the memory of what happened, but it holds the memory of what wanted to happen, what didn't get to complete. I didn't get to flee. I didn't get to reach for contact, whatever it is, right? So we can find the somatic reparative experience and repattern the body. And then there's somatic release, which might be trembling or shaking, or it might be crying. It might be the feeling. It might be the sound that happens, right? And then there's taking the time to integrate the new embodied experience. So there's a way of appreciating even the body for holding this, sometimes for many years. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that chronic pain that I had was you trying to give me this message for all of these years, and now I know. Right? And that, can also include new cognitive meaning making. And it was never my fault, or, I was always good enough, or I was always worthy of love. So reprocessing and exposure and desensitization, right? If we're looking at some of the cognitive layers of this, is this recognition that we only want to go towards trauma reprocessing and exposure when we have sufficient support to do so in a purposeful and reflective manner, so that it's not while we're at the bank or parenting our kids or trying to sleep at night, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to turn towards this unprocessed trauma material in right time and right place. And then maybe I'll talk about it or write about it or explore it interpersonally, or move it through, or feel it, or breathe into it, or get on my yoga mat with it, right? There's so many different ways to reprocess and repattern. The key factor is that because traumatic memories are like an encapsulated self state that's disconnected from our resources, we really want to be able to have enough new information, new positive relational experience, new access to times when we felt understood or at peace or restful or empowered, right? So that we have a new experience that we can integrate with those old wounds. The end result is that we have an experience of empowerment, and that we realize that the past no longer has power over us. And then we can basically help others develop the narrative that includes the challenging and positive moments of life. I am who I am because of all of those experiences. So I have a sense of coherence of self. I like the way that Dan Siegel speaks about the coherent narrative. And, one of the things that he says when he speaks about, for example, earned secure attachment, is that part of what we are cultivating is the narrative that says, this is what happened to me. This is the experiences that I had growing up. This was the kind of attachment that I had. This informs me in the world today. These are my vulnerable places in me. And once I know that, I can make choices to keep myself safe, or to let others know how to best interact with me, to ask for what I need, all of those different pieces. We might not always get what we need, but at least we have the capacity to know what it is for ourselves. And then we've got choice once again. So another common question that I get is, are we focusing on trauma recovery, memory retrieval? What are we doing? And, quite honestly, sometimes the focus on memory retrieval can be detrimental, because memories are not always accessible, or they're vulnerable to influence, or we feel in some ways or another overwhelmed by the memories. So what we're really just trying to do is actively distinguish the past from the present, helping the client know that they're at choice now about how to respond to current events. And so the goal is to experience the self as resilient. When we're looking at somatic trauma release, We're really exploring how we're tracking sensations in the body. We're facilitating the release of tension through movement with an emphasis on regulation of arousal. I was appreciating listening to David Berselli's Q&A earlier today because, some of the folks were asking, and this might be some of you, like I was shaking, and is it too much? Or like at what point, like how am I going to modulate this? And I think it's really a question of, can you stay present with it? Can you stay present? And if you need to slow it down, then we engage in titration, which is that we just go towards smaller amounts or smaller periods of time of being with the distress, and we discharge it at a rate that we can stay present with, where we don't feel depleted or overwhelmed or roll over into panic attack or roll over into collapse. So this is this pendulation of alternating between the resource of a here now sense of safety or connection or groundedness or empowerment, and then we go towards little bits of the distress. So here's where I'm going to invite you to explore a little bit of this experientially. And I'll leave this slide up just for a moment, and then I'll take it down. But I'll invite you to just kind of go into yourself again for a moment, to check in with maybe that initial check-in that we did at the very beginning. And what you're aware of now may have changed because it's been about an hour. So a lot of information has been coming toward you. So with mindful awareness, just notice what you're present with now, what's showing up for you. And I'll borrow from Eugene Genlin, which is in his focusing work, just allowing yourself to, perhaps if it feels right to you, notice anything that's standing in the way of you feeling fine right now. And for our purposes here, you get to choose whether you want to work with that now, how much of it you want to work with, right? If there's multiple things on that list of what's standing in the way of you feeling fine, you get to choose what that might be that you'd work with. So then you can maybe pick one emotion or sensation or concern to be with right now. And just allow yourself to begin to observe the felt sense. Begin to explore if there is any, descriptive word that matches the felt sense, right? So if there's, maybe it's heaviness, maybe it's cage, maybe it's constriction, maybe it's jitteriness, maybe it's fatigue, right? Whatever your word is, just stay with it. Sometimes it's something that comes completely unexpectedly. So I'll invite you to trust your intrinsic and intuitive wisdom. Sometimes the handle or the word comes as an image. Just being with this inquiry as you stay with a felt sense. And you might even bring your hand over that place of your body. Maybe you send your breath there. So we're taking a moment just to deepen into what is present for you now. Allowing yourself to notice if that word or a phrase or image has shown up, and then check in with yourself. See if this word or phrase resonates with the felt sense. And if it doesn't, then stay with the process until something kind of resonates there. And if no word comes, don't worry about it. Just stay with the somatic experience. And just allowing yourself to get to know. This is, once again, an opportunity to be with that exploration. There's no right or wrong. And as you're exploring this, just begin to go into some inquiry. If it feels right, I'll offer a few questions. One is, what is the most important part of this sensation? I'm going to take this off so I can see more of you. What is the most important part of this sensation? Is there anything that this sensation wants you to know? I'm going to remind you once again that this answer may not come in the form of words. So it may be another sensation. It may be through a desire to move in a particular way. It may be through an emotion. So we open up the channels of communication. Is there anything that this feeling wants you to know? What does this feeling need from you? And again, as you go towards this with the question, just let the question kind of reside in the background, because the body can get confused by words. But just the most simple is if you were speaking to a child, even if you were just going in with your wisest self to understand what this feeling needs without it even having to tell you. And it might be more breath, or it might be a movement, or it might be a sound, right? I'm sitting, but you don't have to, right? So you might be standing, you might be laying down. So just honoring how your body is responding. Yeah. Maybe even holding open this question of, what would resolution of this feel like? What might it look like? How do you imagine you would feel if this were resolved? How would you walk through the world? Who would you be? Are there any actions that you need to take, right? Sometimes when there is holding or distress or any, something in the body, it's a signal that something in your life right now is not okay. Are there actions that you need to take in your life right now? Or is it really responding to something from the past, right? And to allow yourself to just be with, whether it's just responding through movement right now or some imagined path forward of action. Perhaps even taking a moment to commit to yourself that the willingness to have heard the message and to follow through. And at this stage of the exploration, just taking a moment and just noticing what's lingering. If you go back to your resonating word, right, or phrase or image, if you go back to that place where you began with, that initial experience of that which is standing in the way of you feeling fine, is there anything that's shifted or changed? And sometimes it's like the onion, we peel off one layer and then what's sitting underneath it is the next one, right? So you might just simply notice, that revealed the next layer. And if that's the case, you can go all the way back through. There might be a new part of the body that's lit up and speaking. There might be a new resonating word. So it's an ongoing dialogue with the body. There may be a new breath pattern that needs to happen, right? There may be a new postural shape that matches the feeling. You can exaggerate it. You can go back in, and then we go back towards the questions, right? What's important about this sensation? What does the feeling want you to know now? What does this feeling need from you? And again, as if you were looking at a child, maybe a child who's mute with no words, and using that most intuitive, wise self. What do you imagine that experience needs, that feeling, that part of you? And at this stage of our process, because I'm going to open it up for some exchange together, if there's more lingering for you, we are going to take the moment to make a commitment to yourself that you will come back, that you will, in right time and right place, return to whatever is lingering, whatever is incomplete. The beautiful thing about, healing is that we have a whole lifetime to do it. We don't have to rush it, nor should we. So commit that this was one layer or two, and that you'll return. And perhaps also tuning into anything that did shift or clarify itself for you. Kind of like, when you're cooking ghee, right? Like it gets clarified, something separates. So if there was a moment of clarification, allowing yourself to appreciate what your body has held for you, what it's here to teach you. Offering that appreciation of self and taking a moment just to integrate and reorient. Thanks, Bonnie. Saw that. It's nice. Yeah. So, let's see, Stace, I'm going to open this up for questions, and I'd really just love to have that as interactive as possible. So you're welcome to use chat if you prefer, but I'd certainly, open it up for those that choose to use the raise hand function, and we can.
Yeah. So I think Lotus.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for this experience that you're giving everyone. My question is, when it comes to doing the activity, the energy seems to be stuck in the root chakra. It's stuck there. It doesn't go anywhere else.
Yes.
And it's extremely strong.
Yes.
So I don't know how to direct it out of it, or do I stay in it?
Okay. Great question. So my first inclination is to honor the stuckness, and you've started that already by naming it, right? So that as soon as we go, there's a stuckness here, I would actually amplify stuck. So squeeze back on it. Let it know that you're onto it. Go towards it, right? If you're going to squeeze at the root, if you're comfortable, and again, pendulate or titrate around this, Lotus, right? Like you don't have to do it all at once, but in right time, right place, it's like squeezing the pelvic floor, squeeze around the buttocks, squeeze in the hips, contract it, and then explore what happens in the way that the body says, you've discovered me, you heard my message, you know that there's a stuckness here, right? And is there a sound to the stuckness? Right? Can we allow another part of the body to take over that? In the EMDR and somatic psychology book, we actually have a whole list, and I'm actually going to pull it up because I had a slide on it and I just didn't get to it. So I'm going to share a slide real quick that you'll appreciate. I think everyone will, but it's so directly connected to your question, but this is it. So somatic interventions for stuck sensations, right? If the sensation could move, how would it move? Is there a sound or word for the sensation? Now with the root chakra, you're right, like put your hands on your pelvic floor if you feel comfortable with it, right? Breathe into it. We can breathe into the root chakra, right? Like you can breathe into your tailbone.
Yes.
Or take it over with your arms. Let your arms and hands express it. Let the whole body take over what's held in the root. So these are all somatic techniques for the stuck sensation. So your question was so perfect because I wanted to share this slide anyway. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And one last one that's on this list that I'll just share before I pull it back down is that that sometimes there's a story there, and we might not have the words, we might not have the narrative, but you can let the body tell the story of what's held in your root chakra by like find a piece of music that matches it, dance it out, right? Like let yourself have it. And if you've ever done authentic movement, it would be a beautiful practice for this because there's the witness, there's the other that can be with you witnessing the body story. Okay.
When it comes to that, one last question. When it comes to that, is that usually an effect of sexual abuse? When it's stuck so much in the root chakra, the way I feel like it is with me?
So here's the thing about that question is that I'm never interpretive about a body sensation. I'm always coming in with curiosity. So I don't know that answer. And because I specialize so much in child abuse and childhood sexual abuse, what I have found is that the body can carry that same quality of response, even if it was energetic, even if it was emotional incest, right? Like there can be the breach of sexual boundary that doesn't equate a physical transgression. So we can't interpret what happened, but if it for you feels like a sexual violation, that's information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Lotus. Yeah. Stace, I don't know if you were going to redirect it or if I'll just go ahead. Basak or Basak, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. And go ahead. I don't know if we have to ask you to unmute.
Yes,
there you go.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot from your talk, and it was very educational. I was wondering if like some of the practices you taught us we can do it by ourselves, but you also taught about like co-regulation. We need to have a psychologist, psychiatrist, somebody to work with us, right? Like, is there anything that we can do ourselves to actually work on our trauma responses, like to
Yes, no, absolutely. You know, this is the thing, is that you can do any of these on your own, so long as it doesn't take you into places where you really needed another, right? Because if the trauma itself was interpersonal in nature or had the lack of other in the form of neglect, then the trauma healing, in my opinion, really is most beneficial with other. It's not that you can't do these on your own. I think it's just a question of that capaciousness and that window of capacity, and can you turn toward this in a way that's not overwhelming or doesn't leave you feeling stuck by yourself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one more question. So you talked about these scientific body parts, the ancient graphics that you show are actually very similar to what chakras are located at their places. I'm so excited. I'm sorry. When I'm so excited, I can't speak English so well. I started thinking in Turkish. Is there any kind of yoga or any kind of body movement we can do?
I have a whole YouTube channel based on this, and my applied polyvagal theory and yoga program that I teach here with Embody Lab starts up again in November starts up in November, and it's all that science of where this comes together. So if that excites you, come take it's a whole course that is like 20 hours where we do a deep dive into that. But in the meantime, go to my YouTube channel or on my website. All the classes are uploaded onto my website as well on the yoga therapy page, and you can practice all of that on your own. I'll guide you through it through those classes. There's like 60 videos. So there's a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm so glad that I attended this class.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
highly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kimberly.
So we're just asking Kim. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Muted.
Hi, Ariel. I feel very honored to be able to ask you a question. I think you're brilliant and wonderful, and you just have incredible energy. I wasn't sure what to ask, or, and I was sort of like, should I talk, but I think the thing that presses on my heart the most is that my son, I mean, I've had a lot of trauma, but my son has had a lot of trauma. Both my children were adopted, which actually that was my original question was, how can it be that my daughter's so much like me and my mom? How can it be that my relationship with my son is so much like my mother's difficulty and conflict and lack of connection with my older sister?
Mm-hmm. Oh, isn't that amazing how things repeat, even when it's not a biological genetic layer, but it's amazing. Yeah.
It is. And also some another little aspect of that is that my daughter was born on my grandmother's birthday, and my son was born within 24 hours of when my brother had gone missing when I was young, and he was in an accident. So this is, but my question is, my son came home at 3.5 months, and he had something on his buttocks, which was an infection. He had a surgery at about 5 months. And we had a visiting nurse, and it happened twice. And I was told to hold him. And it was obviously pre-verbal. And she was pulling out a gauze that was, I want to say it was almost 3 feet long. And he fought like, I mean, we had 3 people holding him down, but he saw me all the time.
I see.
And he has so much trauma, and he has other trauma too, but I feel like this is the root of it, and I'm the face on it, and I don't know how to.
Yeah. So in my books, what I speak about is working. This is kind of a different version of the body story, but of really working with the story memory. So when there's a pre-verbal trauma, but in this case, we know the narrative, we know the story, that it's something that he could. I don't know how old he is now. How old is he?
19. He just told me last night he's angry all the time, and this happened twice with a visiting nurse over weeks of time. So
I would recommend working with a therapist where he can bring the story of what happened to him as a narrative to work through, and then really attending in the way that we did here. But it may take him time to build the somatic and affect tolerance to stay with this, but to work with someone, and whether you're there as part of it or not, but to really work with someone who can basically help hold and help him turn toward the trauma of this as it lives in the body, with titration, right? With reorienting to safety, reorienting even to, if he's open and willing, to really kind of uncouple you with that trauma. But of course, that's his journey, and it requires his own willingness. Yeah. So it's a big question, and well more than I can answer here, but those are a few thoughts on it. So thank you.
Ariel.
Yeah, thank you. All right. How are we doing on time? We got a few more minutes. Tanya. Let's see, do we have to ask you to unmute? Let's try that. Okay. You're good. Yeah. Oh, whoops, you just remuted.
Now. Okay.
Okay.
At least it's showing up there that it's not muted.
Okay, great.
Hi. It's an honor to actually to be able to ask you a question. It's I'm a huge fan of your work. I am a big, I suffered a lot of trauma throughout my life, extensive, from the impact of birth, very traumatic. My mom was hit in the stomach with a baseball bat, down a flight of stairs, born premature, you know, a serious car accident at 7 months, sexual assault under 2, things like that, and consistent throughout life. I did fall down the rabbit hole. I didn't recognize, you know, where I was at with my trauma, and I was disassociated and ran from it to the director of nursing position. And then life started catching up with me, and I got sicker and sicker until I actually had to leave my position and take time to heal. It forced me.
I just have to tell you, I hear these stories all the time. And I mean, thank goodness you had that part of you that could become high functioning, right? Like, thank goodness you had that capacity to launch yourself into nursing. And also, I'll say, you know, I'm, as painful as it is, I'm also glad that your body took over and said, you need to hear me now.
Yeah, it shut down. It plummeted with an MS diagnosis, but I ended up being changed to functional neurological disorder. So because of that body-mind connection, just converting stress into symptoms of MS. I spent probably a year and a half in absolute terror because it triggered complex PTSD through the unresolved portion of it. And I did have to go through all of those body sensations and the shaking and the crying and not being able to sleep, because a lot of mine, I call it black mirrors, because it's all sound, no video, or all sensation, no picture. So I'm just, I love that the whole memory retrieval thing, because I do kind of worry about that. I've overcome a great deal. In February, I had some really big pivotal moments where somebody unlocked Pandora's box and gave me some video to some of those issues that I'd had in the past, one of the early sexual assault issues, and a situation where I was hit with a whip and had my legs split open. So
and I'm just going to ask that, I just want to make sure we're not triggering others here. So
sorry. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I can. You're correct in that. I'm not sure. I think my concern is, like, I feel like I've healed, and, you know, I meditate, yoga, you know, I've completely changed my life. I embody, you know, honoring myself and healthy living. That's become my goal. But I wonder how much concern I should have that some of those other memories that are locked in there, if they're not delved into, if there's a possibility that they will come forward at some other point. And
I think that given the degree of trauma in your history, that is still possible, and to really just orient yourself towards building the resources and staying on the path, staying on the journey, knowing that if they do, who will you turn towards, or what practices will you draw upon, so that it's not so much. I honestly don't even know that, like, having specialized in complex PTSD, that there's an end point when there's that degree of complex trauma in childhood, but there is a shift, a tipping point, as you said, right? And there's going to be increasing tipping points in the healing journey where you're going to be like, okay, like, there might be more that's going to come forward, but I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to be able to handle it, right? So that you're going to feel the increasing resilience in your system grow over time. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, man, I wish I could get to the rest of your questions.
I know, I was just looking at time, and I was like, oh, we've got so many other people that obviously just what you've got, you know, like a wealth of knowledge, Ariel. And we did have a couple of people actually also who were just asking about the 60 hour and what's involved in that. And I know that there is actually you are, along with Scott and the other co-directors for the 60 hour, are actually holding an online free information night, which is in September, I think, if I'm correct.
Yes. I don't know if I have the date in front of me, but yes, at some point in September. Keep your eye on the website.
Keep your eye out. We've got the link that we've just popped into the chat. And yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for you and for everyone that has turned up for this summit today. It's the 27th of September. Thanks, Mariel. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Mariel's on it. So thanks everyone for zooming in. Happy end of day 2, and we will see you back here for day 3.
And thank you. I just want to say I've been like taking in your comments, and it's just very, very meaningful. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Deep bow in return.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.